Welcome to the 7 Effects of Magic by Kenneth Kelly. There's literally thousands, if not millions, of different kinds of magic tricks that you can learn and you can perform as a magician, but an interesting fact is that they all fall into only 7 different categories, or 7 effects as we call them. And by understanding what the 7 effects of magic are, you're going to be able to make sure that you have a good, balanced, well-rounded routine, and it gives your presentation flavour and variety. Think about any magic trick that you know or have seen, and you'll soon be able to start classifying the tricks in one of the 7 categories. And let's have a look what those categories are. We start off with production, vanish, a transformation, transposition, a restoration, a levitation, and a penetration. Some of those may be familiar to you, and looking at it you may see some words there that you're not so familiar with, and we're going to go over them and have a little deeper look into what they might mean. Any magic trick ever invented fits into one of those 7 categories, and we do have some exceptions, and these exceptions are mentalist or mentalism effects, mind reading and that kind of stuff, and escapology, where a magician would escape from some kind of chains. They don't fall within those 7 effects of magic. I was taught about the 7 effects of magic by Marvin Roy, who worked with his wife Carol. They presented an amazing act called Mr. Electric, and that was one of the things that was really instrumental in me choosing to go professional many years later. And I guess around about that time I looked a bit like that. I remember thinking, how can there only be 7 effects in magic? Because I knew hundreds and hundreds of tricks, and it was a little difficult for me to get my head around it. So let's have a bit of a closer look at a few examples. We're going to start off with production. Now this is pretty much an easy one, and you probably know this already. Anything that appears is called a production, and this can be a small coin appearing from a magician's hand, or it could be something really large. It could be a large jumbo jet, it could be an elephant. Anything that appears in magic falls into the category of a production. Now we have the opposite of a production. You probably know it as a vanish, disappearing. A vanish is the opposite of a production. Anything that disappears from a small coin vanishing from the magician's hand, or to a large item like David Copperfield vanishing the Statue of Liberty, is called a vanish. Any item, no matter how big it is or how small it is, that disappears is a vanish. Of course, we also get Vanish washing powder here in the UK. Don't know if you get it, but there it is. Nice to add that in your act. A little bit of vanishing dust. Transformation. This may be a little bit of a vaguer word. A transformation is when any object changes or transforms in shape, size, colour, or form. Let's look at a few examples that we have over here. We have the diminishing cards. That's a trick where a magician shows cards and they steadily get smaller and smaller and smaller in front of the audience. The cards are actually transforming in size, so that's a transformation. Colour changing hanky. Magician places a hanky in his hand, it comes out the other side a different colour. The colour of the hanky is transforming. It is a transformation. Any object, any colour, any shape, any form. How about an orange turning into an apple? That would be a transformation. And there's a very popular trick where you place milk in a glass or a tumbler, you turn it upside down, and a beautiful white silk handkerchief comes out. Well, that is a transformation. Any item that transforms into another one is a transformation. Transposition. This is when one object changes places with another object. If the magician puts a coin in one hand and it magically jumps to the other hand, then that's called a transposition. There's a trick called passe bottle, and that's an effect where you have 2 tubes, you have a glass, you have a bottle, one is under one tube, one is under the other tube. They kind of magically transform from one side to the other. That is a transposition, something moving from one position to another position. Simple as. Metamorphosis, also known as the substitution trunk, is a beautiful illusion, and it was invented by Harry Houdini, and right there we have a very rare photograph of Houdini with his substitution trunk, or metamorphosis as it was known. Jonathan Pendragon from the Pendragons earned a fantastic reputation for doing the trick, the substitution trunk, especially well. He was incredibly lightning fast. It's well worth looking him up on YouTube and having a look at that video. It's breathtaking stuff. Any item that switches places with another item or moves from one place to another is called a transposition. In a way, a transposition, if you break it down into its simplest form, is almost like a vanish and a production, because the item vanishes from one place and produces somewhere else. That is transposition. Restoration, any item that is broken and then it magically fixes itself, this is known as a restoration. You may know torn and restored newspaper. A magician tears up a newspaper, puts it together, shakes it out, all the pieces are together. Here you have a classic example of what a restoration is. Cut and restored rope that we have in front of us over there. Rope cut, comes back together again. Now those are kind of maybe obvious restorations. What might not be as obvious is the bitten and restored coin. And we can see our good friend Mr. David Blaine there with it. He looks like he's just bitten a lemon, if you look at that expression on his face, doing his Blainisms, and he has kind of bitten the coin and then he spits out at the coin, and that kind of restores again. And of course the classic sawing a lady in half, that's a restoration. Levitation. Levitation is probably one of the public's favourite effects, as I think it keys into a subconscious desire that we all have to fly. I don't know if you've ever had a flying dream, but most people have, and any object, including the magician themselves, that defies the law of gravity is classed as a levitation. Now there are some people that kind of differentiate or deviate from that and say that there is an eighth effect, and this is called animation. Now animation is where an object doesn't necessarily rise off the ground, but it does move. For example, the serpent silk, which is a handkerchief you tie in a knot and it magically unties itself. It's not as such a levitation, it is called kind of an animation. But I think for clarity purposes it's probably easier to just lump that in with levitation so that it fits neatly within the 7 effects of magic. A penetration. A penetration, a solid through a solid, is known as a penetration. Chinese linking rings is a really well-known example of a penetration, as the solid rings kind of join together and unjoin. So it's a solid going through a solid both ways. Another well-known example of a penetration is the guillotine illusion, where a blade supposedly passes through the neck of a spectator, leaving the spectator unharmed. The more modern version of the guillotine, where the head is actually seen to fall off, the spectator's or the assistant's head falls into the basket, well, that wouldn't really be a penetration because the head fell off. That, I think, would fall more into restoration. So it's a curious paradox there, because we've got a trick, the guillotine effect, which has 2 different effects to it. To get spice and variety in your routine, see how many of the 7 effects that you can fit into your act. The audience will be unaware that you're using all these different effects in magic. For them, they're just watching magic tricks. But what it does is it adds psychological polish and flair and variety to your act, and it makes you stand out from the crowd. Think of the true classics of magic, the tricks that audience members really love, like the cups and balls, or the sponge balls. In the cups and balls, you've got a transposition where a ball will go from one cup through to another cup. You've got a vanish where a ball will completely vanish. You've got a transformation where a small ball changes into a lemon. You've got a penetration where balls penetrate through cups. All of those different effects being brought into the one routine adds variety, adds spice, and that's one of the reasons why that trick has stood the test of time. Similarly with the sponge balls, you have balls producing, you have balls vanishing, you have balls changing from one place to another, even into the spectator's hands, and you can end off with taking a ball and changing it into many balls, or changing it into a square, or making it change colour, having all those different effects just blending together, just adding spice, adding variety to the magic that you do. I always made sure that in my act I had all 7 effects. It was, for me, it was really important, and this helped me win many competitions, including the national championships of magic. So I think it's worth keeping it in mind. Have a look at these ones that are on the screen now and see if you can see what category these would fall into. You've got a card sword, you've got the educated duck or card duck, and you've got a version of the hippity hop rabbits by Wolf's Magic. Have a think about it. Card sword is a tricky one. Card selected, lost in a pack, magician takes a sword, stabs it in the air, the card's on the end. I think just to recap the categories, the 7 effects of magic: a production, a vanish, a transformation, a transposition, a restoration, a levitation, and a penetration.